So in the context of understanding pastoralism in East Africa, it's important to distinguish between pastoralist, the person, the individual, and pastoralism, the practice. You have the pastoralist actually in practice doing both livestock keeping and agricultural farming. But then you also have pastoralism, which is predominantly based on livestock. And the reason this is an important category to distinguish is because a lot of the time you hear about conflicts existing between pastoralists and farmers, between herders and farmers. And sometimes we lose sight of the fact that it's actually the same person. And actually the conflict, we need to understand conflict as between pastoralism and crop farming, and not necessarily between pastoralists and between herders and farmers, because sometimes they are one and the same person. They could also be different. A lot of the times they are different, but a lot of the time they are also the same group of people. There are few major things. One is the issue of interdependence. And we are seeing interdependence across the gradient highland communities that have historically lived in the highlands are recognizing that they need to diversify the way they practice agriculture and actually moving to the lowlands, almost like splitting their home and having part of it in the lowlands where they can practice agriculture. So we are seeing that kind of interdependence. We are also seeing another kind of interesting kind of interdependence that's within pastoralist communities that are in the lowlands. They are, because of the influx of the farmers and many other drivers as well, they are losing some of their grazing areas. They are losing some of the ways that they have accessed water in the past locally. Because of that, they are actually building new relations with others, new ways of accessing dry season grazing areas elsewhere. And we're actually seeing a very interesting dimension where pastoralist and pastoralism can actually not be thought of as one and the same. They're two different concepts. We think of a pastoralist as one who moves around with their livestock, but actually the individual pastoralists are settling down and practicing farming. They are part of the people who are taking advantage of these irrigation opportunities that are in the lowlands. However, that same pastoralist who is farming is also practicing pastoralism, and he has a herd of cattle that is going to be moving, not always with him, particularly if he's wealthy and can afford to rent, to hire labor. He's going to move his herds where he needs to move it during the dry season. Now, what's interesting is the way those mobility patterns are happening. See, in the past, they would send out scouts who would go out and look and say, oh, look, we have good pasture here. And sometimes they would have to take the cattle with them. They didn't go, the distances they made were not as far as they're making now, because now they have cell phones and they can get in the bus and go look for pasture that way, and then call back and say, hey, send the cattle over here, there's some pasture. And the cattle isn't necessarily walking. They're bringing in huge Isuzu trucks, huge trucks loading up the cows, livestock really, not just cows, the precious livestock, and then sending it by truck. So that's happening with the wealthier people. There are others, and we are seeing this in Kenya, where they are accessing pasture that they were not able to access in the past because it was pasture, it was grass, great grass that didn't have water resources. So what they are doing is sending the cattle there on foot and then trucking in water. It could be once a week, but it's, they're trucking in water, and the cattle at least survive because they do have the grass, and now they do have the water that's trucked in. So pastoralism is really changing, and I think one of the more interesting questions to ask now is what form will pastoralism take in the future?